All right, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody. Well, if you were new, so I was listening to one of the channels I subscribe to on YouTube. The name, highly recommended, by the way. The name of the channel is Count Everything. Count Everything, 2 words. Count Everything, and it's some guy that works out of the UK, I believe. I don't know if he's English or Welsh or whatever, but he does his videos on his cell phone, walking around in the countryside, which is really kind of nice. He always seems to have some topic related to global eating or mass extinctions or something along those lines. So definitely topical for this channel. I watched this video. It was called what was it called? It was called something. I'm sorry, I should look it up. Something about the frogs. Anyway, definitely check his channel out. He's got a lot of great content. Very entertaining guy. Deadpan humor, certain amount of sarcasm. You know how the English are. If he's English, he may be Welsh. I don't know. Could be Scottish. But anyway, so he was talking about he had gone to some scientific symposium nearby and got some time with a scientist who was visiting, and that guy was promoting a book about pheromones in animals, an academic book, basically a classroom book. But they got to talking about animals, and so he did this video kind of wrapped around his interview with this scientist, which is kind of cool. I like how he interleaved the two video segments together. So he was talking about in his own video, he's talking about frogs or amphibians in general, frogs in particular. And the story is that the amphibians, because their habitat requirements are so particular and their lifestyles are fairly complicated, amphibians have a fairly complicated lifestyle. They're half of their lifestyle is required to take place in the water, and the other half takes place on land, where they do most of their hunting. So frogs are in a particularly bad place. They have 2 habitats, both of which have to overlap. A wet environment for laying their eggs and the early part of their life cycle, and then the land part that also has to be moist. And you can't have a lot of pesticides, and you can't have a lot of fertilizers, because their skin, they don't have an integument like fur or scales or any of those things. They just have raw skin, kind of like the same way that humans have. So anything that comes in contact with them pretty much immediately comes in contact with their bloodstream, and that can be really bad for frogs and toads. But anyway, I don't want this to become a nature channel. So he was lamenting the fate of frogs and how difficult it is for them to find a suitable habitat. So he even compared himself, kind of tongue in cheek, to this will be a video like David Attenborough, but it kind of wasn't. And he was obviously getting to a point, which is that extinction is a thing. Extinction is real. And some people think the amphibians as an order, right, as a group of creatures, the amphibians, one of the oldest groups of creatures that we know of. The only real group that's older than the amphibians is the fish, right? Fish came first, then amphibians, and then reptiles. So amphibians were a transition step, a necessary one, to reptiles and then later mammals. But they were successful. They didn't go extinct. They just continued to be successful. But they're one of the oldest. And by the way, among the fishes, the bony fishes are very old order as well. But there's even older fish like the rays and the sharks, which are cartilaginous, don't even have bones. They're cartilage. So there's some very old, very, very old fishes, and there's some very old amphibian orders. And yet, because of what we are doing to the planet, particularly global heating and the climate change that results from that, the amphibians may not make it. And the reasons for them not making it are several. We've already pretty well carved up the world against their use of it. So when they migrate to try and go back to the ponds, what do they run into? They run into modern agriculture. They run into polluted streams, which they can't really lay their eggs in. They have to get past them somehow. They run into freeways, multi-lane freeways where they're slow-moving creatures and they just hop, 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 and sometimes not one of them can get across the road if it's a busy night or a busy road. Even fences or houses or other types of construction projects, malls and parking lots can just pretty much stop them, right? They can't. It's too big. They can't get around it. They can't get over it. So we've already carved up the landscape in a way that is not real conducive to them. And then there's the pesticide use, and then there's the fertilizer use, and it's the deck is stacked against the amphibians at this point. And then, of course, global heating came along, and the temperature of the Earth is not suitable for them. If it gets really hot, heat often leads to both, their ponds, their temporary ponds, because they can't really reproduce in ponds or waterways with fish or running water. They need temporary ponds with no fish. Just the things that the little tadpoles eat, the muck on the bottom of the pond, and then the adults don't even eat from the pond. They come out and they catch bugs on land and other things, snails and slugs. So, they're very specific water needs, and so global heating, and if there's significant climate change like changes in rainfall, they won't have the suitable habitat for them to reproduce. And even though they live a fairly long time, they can live 5 years, 10 years. People keep toads and frogs as pets for their entire childhood, right? They can live a long time, and that's good because their requirements for reproduction are so exact that maybe some years they can't even find it. But if we change the Earth sufficiently, then the frogs aren't going to make it. The frogs and the toads and all the others in their order are just not going to make it. The amphibians all have pretty much the same requirement, and they just won't survive. And even if the water's there, it might be too hot, right, for them to reproduce. All animals and plants too have, narrow ranges of climate conditions, and heat is one of those. So, the deck is stacked, and he was talking about the frogs and how there may not be frogs in the summer eventually. Nobody really knows, right? But it's not a bad guess. If we're talking about desertification and savannification and, either excessive or reduced rainfall, then these are all bad for amphibians. There's a lot more I could say about species extinction, but we are in the sixth mass extinction. So you have to be prepared, since that's reality. That's the truth. That's what's real. That's what's really happening. Okay. And since that's what's really happening, we all have to be prepared for there to be losses, and possibly substantial losses. We may lose all the amphibians. It's entirely possible because of what humans are doing and what we're doing to the biosphere, to the atmosphere and the lithosphere and the hydrosphere and all of it. We're changing the planet. So who's to say that after 300 million years, the amphibians, successful up to now, actually make it? May not. What? That's not really the point I want to make about that video, although you should watch it because he does very good work. I mean, really exceptionally good work. David Attenborough would be proud, honestly, would be proud. Again, the name of the channel on YouTube is Count Everything. Okay. Go there. The reason I'm having this video, the reason why I would want to talk about this is, yes, okay, the sixth mass extinction, sure, global heating, we got a problem. But one thing I was waiting for him to do, and he kind of did it, but then he sort of, I think he shied away from it, or maybe he just hadn't really thought it all the way through. But there's another species. See if you can follow this. There's another species that has very, very distinct habitat requirements. And that also isn't really that mobile and is in a complex world that is sort of incomprehensible. It doesn't understand what's happening. Things are happening too quickly. There's another species. There's another entire genera, and, maybe even an order that is just not going to cope. Maybe some individuals will cope. And there will probably always be amphibians of certain types, right? Hardy things like toads, maybe certain newts or salamanders that are fairly tough and can handle different conditions. But um, a large scale die off, even if it's not extinction, is still a big deal, right? And what I'm trying to get at here is that the fate of the amphibians and the reasons why they are vulnerable, their specific habitat requirements, they're that they can't adapt quickly enough, that they can't figure out what's happening to them, that it's incomprehensible, it's happening too fast. All the things that are going to catch the amphibians unaware are going to catch us. Us. Let me tell you a little story. We have this thing called a canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine. Coal miners, not so much anymore because they have instrumentation, but back in the day, 100 years ago, maybe even less than that, coal miners working underground had an enemy underground. They actually had two. One of the enemies underground was water. Water was always pouring into the mine, so they had to constantly pump the water out. But the other enemy to the coal miners was methane gas. And the problem with methane gas is, well, for one thing, it's not oxygen. So if you're working in a cave and it's filling up with methane gas and you don't really notice that or you're not aware, you can asphyxiate. You can just get a little bit dizzy and then fall down. And now you're laying in the methane, right? You're not even up here in the methane. You're down there in the methane. And if there's not people to drag you out of there and bring you to where there's oxygen, then you would probably die. They would find you as a corpse. You'd be dead from asphyxiation. But also, methane is explosive. And in the areas where it's mixing with oxygen, meaning where the men are working, a spark can set it off. And you can have the whole mine just blow up like a bomb, like a fuel bomb. It is a fuel bomb because methane is a fuel. It's natural gas. So what they discovered, I should look this up. I'm sure there's an answer. How did they discover this? What they discovered is the birds are more sensitive to methane levels in the air they're breathing than humans are. And what they do, and is this just an urban myth? I don't know. I think it's probably true. They would take a canary in a little cage down into the mine with them, and they'd put the canary where they're working, and they'd look at the canary every so often, and then they'd work and they'd check on the canary. And if the canary's dead, they get out, they leave. And that's the canary in the coal mine. And what's the purpose of the canary? They certainly don't want the canary to die, because if the canary dies, then they need to get out of there. But the canary dying is useful in that case because it's a warning that they wouldn't otherwise have, because you can't smell methane. It's odorless as far as humans are concerned. And maybe it's even odorless to birds, but it does kill them. So before it kills us. So they figured out that having a canary with you in the coal mine can be used as an indicator. So this is still a meme in language where we talk about the canary in the coal mine. Most people don't even know why we have that as a turn of phrase, but that's why we have it. It was a real thing. A canary in a coal mine is a warning. And if the canary's alive, then you're fine, probably. And if the canary's dead, you're not fine at all. You got to get out of there. So this is the point where I point out that the sixth mass extinction as an event is really like the canary writ large. It's a warning. And the amphibians in particular are a special warning. The amphibians are like a canary. We share habitat with amphibians. Frogs and toads are summertime classics. Finding tadpoles in a pond is a summertime classic. This is what kids used to do. I grew up this way. We always had springtime tadpoles of all kinds of frogs. The little frogs, big frogs, the big bullfrogs, the ones you can eat. But it was. I grew up with these creatures, right? And they were in temporary ponds, and they had to get their life cycle done quick enough to be be mobile animals, and then they would go live someplace else. And I never saw them reproducing, but they did. And so without that habitat, they perish. So if you were up where I used to live in the North State, and all of a sudden you don't hear frogs anymore peeping in the night, and you don't hear the big bullfrogs peeping down by the river, then you might start to suspect that there's something wrong with your habitat because you're living there too. And what might be the problem? The problem is it's too hot. The problem could be that there's not enough rainfall. The problem might be that the ponds have all been drained or they've all been paved over or something else. We don't really know. But if you don't hear the amphibians anymore, or if the amphibians go away, or the frogs go away, that's a sign to you that something is wrong. It is. Now, whether you act on that signal, that sign, okay, that's a completely separate question, of course. And the coal miner, when the canary's dead, they grab their stuff and they get out of this quickly as they can. Well, you are in the sixth mass extinction, and the amphibians are not going to make it. And that should be a warning to you because we also have very specific habitat requirements. We do. We do. And one of your habitat requirements is fossil fuels. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the time you were born, from the time you were conceived, okay, to the time you die. And for some time after you're dead, because they use fossil fuels to bury you in the ground in a cemetery that's maintained with fossil fuels. So from before you were born to a certain number of days after you have died, you are completely dependent every single hour of every single day on fossil fuel inputs constantly. And if it weren't for that, you would not, in all probability, be here. And at the very least, you wouldn't be living the way you are. And you are also dependent, in large part, no one thinks about this, but you are entirely dependent on your electricity, your water deliveries to your house. You don't have a well. There's no river you can go down to with your donkey and a barrel and get water to, for your bathing and your drinking. There's nothing. There's nothing like that for you. You have to. There's a pipe that comes in from the street, and there's a water main out there, and there's a bunch of people. There's thousands of people that maintain that system for you. For you, they maintain that system for you, and that system was put in place with fossil fuels. It's maintained with fossil fuels. Those people come to and from their job with fossil fuels, and that whole thing is fossil fuel dependent. And that's just water. Electricity is even worse. The natural gas, a fossil fuel that you use directly in your house to cook and heat your water and maybe space heat your house, right? Or maybe you have a natural gas fireplace that you like to sit in front of in the winter, enjoy the fire. All these things, that natural gas, that is extracted from the ground hundreds of miles away and transported through great big pipelines underground. You can't even see them. You don't even know where they are until finally there's a gas main in front of your house. It's probably a 6-inch gas main that goes down the middle of the road or under the sidewalk in front of your house. And your house has a little service line, probably 1.5 inch, that goes to a meter and heads to your house. And you didn't create any of that. You didn't create that. That was created for you probably before you were born. And it's always been there. And it's, again, constant maintenance. In fact, they were telling us, called us on the phone recently and said, we're going to be fixing the natural gas line in front of your house. Yeah, people do that all the time. They've got their plastic pipes. They're going to run a new pipe inside the old one, right? They don't really tear up the lines. They just line them with a new piece of plastic. So they got their big coils of orange polypropylene pipe down just around the corner from my house. Huge spools that wouldn't even fit in this room. Great big spools of polypropylene, polyethylene. And they're going to run that down inside there, and they're going to hook our house up to it and the whole thing. All that. Fossil fuels. Without it, we couldn't have natural gas. And the fossil fuel investment in just the natural gas, which is also a fossil fuel, goes all the way back to the wellhead somewhere out in the Central Valley, where the natural gas is naturally found. So your water, your natural gas for your heating and cooking, your electricity, that's even worse. And then even your sewer, when you flush the toilet, there's another line out there. There's a big sewer line. And there's pump stations that run on electricity. And you flush your toilet and it drains into that line, and that line flows downhill to a big pump, and that pump pumps out to a sewer farm, and that sewer farm treats all the effluent for the community. And there's hundreds of people that work there, and they're mechanics and electricians and water scientists and chemists And all these people drive to that water station. It's clear in the middle of nowhere. No one lives out there. These people drive 40, 50, 80 miles a day to go to work out at the water treatment plant. Oh, and by the way, there's another water treatment plant for the fresh water coming in from, well, for us, it's Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, which is what, 400 miles away up in the Sierras? Yeah, you live in a built habitat. They have different words for it. They call it worked. They call it built. This was made for you using fossil fuels. And so you're like the frog in that regard. And I kept waiting for Count Everything to say, as goes the frogs, so goes the humans, because there is a shared predicament. Predicament is not a problem. A predicament is specifically a problem that has no solution. Okay? The frogs can't solve their problem. If they can't find habitat to reproduce, if they can't find insects, that's another thing going extinct, by the way. If they can't find insects and things to eat, if they can't solve that problem, that's not a problem for them. It's not a problem, air quotes, for them. It's a dilemma. It's a predicament. It's a wicked problem because it has no solution. There's nothing they can do. And your dependency on fossil fuels is not something you can solve, except that you could not have a dependency on fossil fuels. You see the difference? I mean, that's the thing you can do that a frog cannot. The frogs are going to go extinct. The toads are going to go extinct. The amphibians, the entire type of animal is probably going to go extinct. They're just not going to survive. 300 million years. 300 million years of hanging out on this planet. They're finally going to go extinct. It's our fault. Of course, along with the elephants and the zebras and the giraffes and the wildebeests and the king cobras and the monitor lizards, and they're all going to go extinct too. We're probably going to be left with nothing but urban animals, right? Raccoons, possums, pigeons, squirrels, wharf rats. And where are the humans? Because we're going to have to give up on fossil fuels someday. And now we're not going to do it to save the frogs. Come on, we're not going to do it for that reason. And we're not going to do it to save the giraffes. We're not going to give up on fossil fuels even to save the humans. We're just not going to do that. You're not going to do that. If someone presented that to you on a ballot, you've got, what, Biden or Trump? Okay, great. Give up on fossil fuels or keep burning them. Check. Fastest decision you've ever made. Fossil fuels, I know what that is. That's gasoline and diesel and natural gas, and check. Yeah, I want some of that. Fastest decision you ever made. And Democrats will, yep, fossil fuels, that's good for me. Democrats, Republicans, yep, MAGA-ites, check, double check, right? Everybody wants the fossil fuels. There's no way you're giving up on that. No way, not a chance. But you're going to have to. You see what happens? No way you would give up on that. But you're going to. You're either going to do it or it's going to be done unto you. You will either do it to yourself in a controlled manner with forethought and planning, and applying your primate intelligence to how I'm going to do this, problem solve that, problem solve this. I'm going to have to do without this thing. I'm going to have other opportunities over here. And, just constantly reminding yourself, this is what I have to do. Or it will be done to you at a time and in a way that you didn't anticipate. And why is that? Because it has to happen. That's it. It has to happen. There are things that are like that. Gravity wins. You drop it, it falls. Why? Because it has to. Do I have to explain gravity to you? Do I have space-time curvature and Newton's laws of gravity? You have to do that? Just do the experiment yourself. Hold something up, let go of it, and it drops to the ground. That's how it works. It'll always work. Every time you do it, it'll work the same. And it doesn't matter where you are on the earth, it'll work just like that. You can even be on the moon and it'll work. It works everywhere in the universe where there's large bodies that create a gravitational field, so-called. Things fall. And you are going to have to give up fossil fuels. Why? Because it's necessary. It's simply going to happen. It's not quite a law of nature, but it's almost. And let me explain that to you. Burning fossil fuels emits CO2. CO2 enters the atmosphere where it remains for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, and it enhances the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect itself is normal and natural, and we are grateful for it, because if it wasn't for the natural greenhouse effect, the Earth would be some 60 degrees Fahrenheit cooler, which is a lot, right? That for a day like today, it's 71 degrees right now. That would place me, just a few degrees above 0 Fahrenheit, which is like 20 something degrees below freezing. So yeah, that's a big deal. And all the time, really, the entire planet would be like that, and some places worse. Okay, that would be a problem, right? For us, for all life, if it wasn't for some kind of heat trapping capability in the atmosphere. But the problem is, of course, that we're enhancing it. We're adding to it. The CO2 is accumulating, and it's heating the planet. It just is. That's what's happening. And there's some discussion among climate scientists and physicists about how much it's going to heat the planet for a given amount of CO2 that we release, for a given amount of carbon dioxide, fossil fuels that we consume. And we can expect a certain amount of change in the atmospheric chemistry and CO2 component, and the resulting warming that we can calculate or guess at, and blah, blah. And so we can talk about that. We can debate the fine details of how much it's going to warm or how rapidly it's going to warm. We can debate whether it's going to affect different species or different parts of the world or different regions, or more rain or less rain or whatever. We can talk about that. But you can't deny that that's what's going to happen. The planet is going to get hotter. How much hotter? How quickly? Kind of doesn't matter. But it's just going to keep getting hotter. That's what it's going to do. And it's not going to stop. That's happening because you and I and everyone else 24/7 required to burn fossil fuels just for basic survival. Required to burn fossil fuels just for survival. The same way that a frog must find a certain type of pond, temporary pond, just to reproduce. That's his requirement. That's the thing he has to do. And that means, getting across parking lots and freeways, and avoiding the pesticides and avoiding the fertilizers, and not getting run over by a car and not getting eaten by a rat. He finally finds his pond and reproduces. That's his problem that he can't solve. All that has to line up for him so he can reproduce and not go extinct. And for you, what has to line up for you so that you don't go extinct, your whole species, or certainly a bunch of us as individuals, that's called a die-off. All right. It's not extinction, but hey, you wouldn't want to be in the middle of one. So the way we avoid a die-off and the way we avoid extinction is we don't let the Earth get too hot to not be habitat for us. The frogs are going to lose their habitat due to global heating, and humans can lose their habitat due to global heating, because your habitat, at the very least, there's a certain temperature range, there's a certain amount of rainfall, there's a certain amount of snowfall. You can't have, you can't have it be too hot when the plants are being planted, and you can't have it be too cold when the fruits are on the trees, and all these other things have to all kind of line up for us, and our crops and our domesticated animals and everything has to line up so that, just like the frog getting across the freeways and the parking lots, everything has to line up for us so that we can yet again survive another year, another reproductive cycle. And without fossil fuels, those things don't line up for you. They just don't. And yet you're going to have to stop burning fossil fuels, because if you don't, then the planet is going to be uninhabitable. That's physics. That's like dropping a rock and it hits the ground. That's physics. Okay. Newtonian physics or Einsteinian curved space-time, or whatever physics you want to use. That's physics. And if we don't stop emitting CO2 into the atmosphere, which means if we don't stop burning fossil fuels, because that's really the base problem. That's the root cause analysis, is we're burning fossil fuels. That's where the CO2 is coming from. If we don't stop doing that, then the Earth becoming largely uninhabitable for humans is going to be on the level of dropping a rock and it falls and hits the ground. It's just how it's going to be. And you cannot like it, and you won't like it. But so what? Who cares what you like or you don't like? Well, you care, right? And so you have an obligation, if you're a mature adult and you take responsibility for your own survival, then sure, okay, you'll have a preference and you'll think about that, and what can you do to fix that? Well, you can't stop global heating. You can't. we can stop global heating. All humans together, simultaneously, holding hands and jumping at the same time, we can all stop burning fossil fuels. Uh, are we going to do that? So far, I don't think so. I don't think so. And, yeah, it'd be nice if we could save the frogs from global heating. But, now I think about it, it'd be kind of nice if we could save ourselves from global heating. And let's allow the frogs and the amphibians writ large to be our canary in our coal mine. They're the warning. And, you don't care about a canary. You take it into the coal mine. You hope every day you bring the canary out alive because he's your buddy, right? He's working with you to determine if that habitat is unhealthy for you. But, we wouldn't want to lose the amphibians. But on the other hand, if we're losing the amphibians, that's like the canary in the coal mine. You could take that as a warning. It's time to look at what you're doing wrong. You need to get out of here. And here, the space you're in isn't a coal mine as such. It's your dependency on fossil fuels. You need to get out of that. And hey, if enough people decide that they're able to survive without fossil fuels, however they do that, that's a complicated problem, but it is a problem you can solve. It is human scale. You could solve that problem for yourself. You could work with your government, your state government, local government, to get as many people off of fossil fuels as possible. Here in California, I think for certain types of new construction, they're not allowing natural gas lines to be run to the houses. And they're also requiring new construction, residential construction, to have residential solar installed. So somebody, interesting, right? Somebody at the state level in California, I don't know if it's anywhere else in the United States Union, but at least California has taken a stand. And they're going to force people, even if they don't like it, whatever, we're trying to be adults here, to not be dependent on fossil fuels for every single thing that happens in their home. Now, I'm all electric in my home. I heat water with a heat pump. I have heat pump air conditioning. It's electric. Of course, most people would. But heat pumps can also heat, hence the name. So you can heat your house as well as cool your house. And this is now air conditioning in the original sense of the word. You can either heat the air or cool the air, or you can also dry the air if that's what you're after. So you alter the air. You can condition the air. So air conditioning writ large, like meaning multi-phase heat pumps, they're electric. So you can heat your house with electric. It's perfectly acceptable. Oh, but my electric bill. Oh, but you see, you can solve that too. You can put rooftop solar. And sometimes you're using this direct sunlight, and other times you're buying from the grid. And then sometimes you create so much excess energy from your solar, you sell it back to the grid. And so you can use the grid, your utility grid, as a battery, or you could even have batteries. And if you got an electric vehicle and you're charging your electric vehicle at night when you come home, oh, there's no solar. This is really dumb. Why did I buy an electric vehicle and have solar panels when they're not even working at night and I can't charge my vehicle? Well, once again, if you've been selling electricity back to the grid, I'm just trying to explain this shit, okay? People don't get it. I don't know why. If you've been selling electricity back to the utility company all day when you were at work or at Disneyland or wherever you were, and then you come home and you want to charge your car, you buy that electricity back. That's the way it's supposed to work. I don't know, maybe it does work that. I don't know. But you can also, most of the dealerships that will sell you an electric car will also sell you a battery to mount in your garage on the wall that charges during the day when electricity is cheap or free if you have your own solar panels. That's one reason to have your own solar panels. You can charge your own battery in your garage. And then at night, when you come home, you plug your car into your battery, and that's energy that you've been collecting all day, especially if you have solar panels. So there's your electric car. You bought your own electricity. You stored it in a battery. You put it in your car at night when it's sitting there in the garage all night, and you're cooking with an electric cooktop, and you're heating your water with a heat pump, and you're heating your house with a heat pump, and your electric lights are all LEDs. And you have a new home, so it doesn't even have natural gas. There isn't even a natural gas meter. You don't pay. There's no one comes and reads your meter. There's no bill. There's not even a section in your bill for natural gas. You're off of fossil fuels. And if you did have an electric car, then you have some sort of narrative about how you got yourself off of fossil fuels. So you could do that. And here in California, a lot of people are already living like that, whether they thought about it in advance or not. Now, if you're living in an existing home, you're going to have to rethink a lot of this stuff. You're going to have to say, I'm using a really old water heater that's heating my water with natural gas, and that's kind of a problem. If they ever have to raise the price of natural gas to get people off of it, and using market signals to get people off of natural gas, then wow, this is going to cost me a lot of money to heat that water. And it's going to cost me money even to cook my food. So, I need to get out ahead of this. Um, I'd like to be able to shut my natural gas off so that I'm not dependent on it. I'm not going to save the world that way, but I don't want to be dependent on it. That's something I can do. I cannot be dependent on that. Frogs can't solve their problem. They need certain types of temporary ponds with no fish in them that contain fresh rainwater so they can reproduce quickly and have their tadpoles and have their life cycle completed before it dries up. And they can't solve that problem. Maybe some of us can solve our problem of dependency on fossil fuels. Now, you still have to go to your workplace, and that place is still dependent on all these other people driving there with regular cars that burn gasoline and diesel. And so, the business model doesn't really hinge around, solar electric vehicles or solar electric anything. But maybe it could. What if you're doing technology work? What if your company does a lot of their code development in a server farm somewhere? That server farm could be getting its electricity from renewable resources like windmills and solar panels. Yes, I know they're made using fossil fuels, but that's not the point. The point is you invest a certain amount of fossil fuels into creating an alternative to fossil fuels, and then you're no longer dependent on fossil fuels for a while. Could do, might do, should do. Will you? Will they? Will anybody? Of course not. Of course not. No, of course they won't do those things. At least not on a broad basis, not with it, not deliberately, not as an adult conversation. They'll buy a new house and they'll say, "Where's the natural gas appliances? Why am I cooking with electric? Why am I heating my water with electric? So expensive." They'll say, "Yeah, well, new construction in California, you can't have natural gas." Oh my God, I wish you told me that before I made a down payment. Well, welcome to California. I'm gonna go live in Nevada. Okay, fine, go live in Nevada. We'll sell your house for more than you paid for it, because that's what housing is going for in California. Leave. Go live someplace where you can be dependent on fossil fuels, and you're going to go the route of the frogs, who couldn't figure their shit out. But I don't expect them to figure their shit out. They have a brain the size of a pinky nail. Okay, I expect you to figure your shit out. And if you can't save the frogs in the process, well, I guess that's bad news for the frogs. Sorry. I'm a biologist. I care about living things. I should care about the frogs, but I understand their problem. I understand their dilemma, that it has no solution, that they cannot solve their problem, nor can I. I cannot solve their problem. So the amphibians, frogs, toads, salamanders, newts, the whole bunch of them, the whole class of animals, after 300 million years of doing really well, they're not going to make it. Fine, okay, I can't solve that problem. Nobody can solve that problem. Oh, maybe we can raise some of them in zoos, or arboretums or something, and keep some of them alive as specimens. But really, honestly, they're done. They're done, and because they're done, we're done. As they go, we go. We could have taken that as a warning. We could have taken the whole sixth mass extinction as a warning, but that's just not happening. We're in the mine. The canary is dead, and we're so busy making money. I got to get this coal out of here. If I get another 50 pounds of coal out of here, free drinks for me. And you're just working, and the canary's dead. Well, why do we have canaries in coal mines? To warn us that this is an unsafe situation. And we have all these scientists telling us sixth mass extinction. We have a whole other group saying amphibians probably won't survive the century, maybe not even the next couple of decades. And dead canaries all everywhere around us. And we're just doing business as usual, ignoring the signs. What was the point? What was the point of even someone telling us, oh yeah, there's a sixth mass extinction? Is there any point to that? It's a warning. Why bother? We can't get our heads out of our butts long enough to even pay attention to the warning. There it is. It's right there in front of you, the sixth mass extinction. And what, you think you're going to be fine personally or as a species? You think you're going to be fine? I don't think so. I really don't. And I can talk about all the ways you could die. I can talk about all the ways that your habitat is being swept out from under you. I can talk about how it's going to feel when you wake up one morning and your entire world has just ceased, and everything that you thought was sacred and eternal has just come to a grinding halt. In fact, of course, if you've been on this channel recently, I'm writing the book. It's almost time for another installment. That'll be episode 4. Maybe I'll do it tonight. I'll probably have to do a little more writing, but yeah, maybe I'll do another installment tonight. What it's like to have the chair knocked out from under you. It's hard. Lots of people don't make it. Not a pleasant thought. Not a pleasant reality. Okay. Because this is speculative fiction that I'm writing. And, you know, I think when it's done, it's going to tell a compelling story. And I don't think, people will always say, "Oh, that's unlikely. That's just fiction. People aren't really like that. We're not really that dependent. The government wouldn't let that happen. That's not how people are going to act." Come on. The supermarkets will always have food. Come on, there will always be gasoline at the service station. This is America. We have freedom. We have democracy. There'll always be gasoline at the service station. Really? Then you haven't thought this through. Okay, you haven't thought this through. And you're apparently not thinking about we are in the middle of the sixth mass extinction, and the amphibians aren't going to make it as a class. And you have a similar problem as the amphibians. You don't know what's happening to you, and you have very particular requirements to survive. And you never think about that. 3.5 pounds of brain, a lot bigger than a pinky nail. And you're no better off than the frogs. Is that a mean thing to say? Then I guess I'm a bad person.